to Job Ready. I am Charlie, the entrepreneur.
And I remain Professor James. And today we're going to hear the truth, the real thing, the way it is for the college graduates going into their early career right after graduation. We've got two great guests today joining us from the University of Florida. We have Kelly Boudreau, a recent graduate in digital arts and sciences. And we also have our friend Cody Davis, who's also a badass graduate in digital arts and science. Welcome, Kelly and Cody.
Hello.
I'm just going to say, badass. That's such a badass name. Who named that anyway?
Well, it's because it's a Bachelor of Arts in Digital Arts and Sciences, BADAS. It just seemed the natural thing to the director to start doing that. He got a little guff from the faculty saying, the parents are going to not like that and everything. The parents came in and were like, this is cool. So it's my fault. I was the one that sort of forced that to be, in a moniker, but it's okay. Let's get started.
All right. By the way, that's such a badass name, just like EFA, right? What the EFA?
Well, EFA, as you may know, is the employer-funded financial aid, which is a concept to reduce student debt, which is our sponsor for our. So when we sort of make a joke, we go, what the EFA?
All right, guys, let me out today's conversations a little bit with a couple of stats, and then we go into it. Federal Reserve Bank of New York, they just published the 5.8% unemployment rate for the last 5 classes of college grads. And then last spring, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a stunning 12% unemployment rate for college grads in their 20s. I don't want to start out in the bloom, but I want to kind of set the stage here a little bit. So here's my position, guys. It's the AI world that we just live in at the moment. But how do we come across more human, right? It seems like the deck at the moment is stacked against grads. On one hand, you got higher ed, where it's still debating whether it's academically acceptable with using AI in the learning process. And arguably mastering the latest AI tools isn't the most talked about or up to date in the higher ed landscape. And a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace, so companies aren't hired as much as they used to. And on top of that, AI is evolving so fast, exponentially every single day. Many of the tasks that typically align or assign to first-year associate are now completely taken away. And the current workforce can get so much done with the AI tools that companies don't need to hire more, right? And so the grads need to demonstrate much more AI fluency in order to demonstrate job readiness. So the question is, given the fact that you guys are what I consider, and check me if I'm wrong here, a lot of folks talk about the incoming workforce as digital natives. You master AI much quicker than a lot of us, and I'm looking at you, Professor James, and myself in this context. How do you turn this into an advantage so that you can outcompete, outsmart, and get shit done, if you will? And feel free, by the way, guys, feel free to challenge my position.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm gonna jump in here for a second, and you might, if you don't mind, have you used AI during your college career? And if so, do you think any of that has helped prepare you to use it in the workplace, or are those two completely separate sort of mindsets? Kelly, you have any thoughts on that?
In terms of how we've used it in our college degree, there are a couple classes that teach us how to experiment with it, not necessarily in a replacement way, but more so this is out here, understand that it does exist and how it can help or not help. But I feel like a lot of times we tend to stray away from actually using it to make our own work, and just know that it is there and people can use it if they need to. But we tend to see that and then say, oh, I can do it better though. And I can also do it pretty quickly, maybe not as fast because obviously it's pretty instant, but I could do it better even if that is instantaneous, gratification wise.
Cody, how about you? And tell us a little bit about what kind of work it is that you do and what career you see yourself going into.
Yeah, I'll start off with the AI. I think it's more so a tool. Right now, it can't be the end product. I've seen it used as in concept, like how to formulate your idea quicker, but the end quality is not anywhere near what a human can do. Even though it's technically faster, And I've used AI throughout my career in college, but I only used it as like a drafting tool to help me get things done quicker. But the end result and my ideas aren't the AI's, it's mine.
And what field do you work in, Cody?
I work in 3D environment art. I make games or movie digital environments for if it's either a game, so you can have that world building and kind of generate that idea. And also I use it for movies. I used an LED wall and created environments for like a virtual set. And that's kind of like the career field I'm aiming for.
How about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm aiming for more of a 3D animator position, whether it's in 3D animated films or cinematic CG shots from games. That's kind of where I tend to focus my skills. And then also, when you're an animator, you always have that drawing background, or usually you do. And so I also have a lot of storyboarding experience that comes with that.
When you guys talk about AI and the tools you use here, I mean, I do agree that AI, at least today, can't get the job done, ultimately the end result better than us, at least not yet, right? But at the speed in which AI evolves, I mean, who knows, right? I mean, a year ago it couldn't create a video. Today it is a norm. So, you know, with that as a backdrop, what do you do on a day-to-day basis as your school, even perhaps to, use AI to reduce some of the redundancy, some of the more kind of low-value tasks, if you will? What struck me as a part of the advisory board meeting at the University of Florida a couple of months ago, I forgot the gentleman's name, but he talked about reducing thousands of clicks. That typical, that you would have to go through as part of this process down to the minimal to get more work done. So talk us through a little bit, help me understand that, if that is something that you have in place or currently using.
I think overall productivity theoretically would go higher per person using AI. For instance, there's a process in 3D modeling called UV mapping, and that is very tedious work. And if AI were integrated to use that, productivity would go even higher to create assets for games and movies instead of having to learn. I mean, knowing is important, but having to learn it also is very time consuming. And that's what ultimately AI I think is going to do, is make everything shorter. I don't think it'll fully replace people, but it'll make a person know more in their position that they could do multiple tasks. So being more of a generalist is more sought after now than being a specialist. Is going more broad. But also ultimately with the landscape of media, I think it's eventually going to go back to having a human touch. Sure, AI is the craze right now, and there's going to be videos and everyone's going to be looking at AI content. But eventually, I think it's in probably the next 10 years, people are going to crave more human created content, because it's kind of like traditional painting versus, digital art. People still buy traditional paintings that are oil painted by humans. So we'll see though.
You bring up a good point, Cody. I mean, a lot of artists, whatever their field, have been threatened historically sometimes with new technology. I go back to the turn of the century when we had painters and photography came out. The camera was a piece of technology that the painters were up in arms about, this piece of, this machine taking the places, not art. And now, of course, we see art, photographs and paintings and digital art in museums. But let's go forward now in your career over the next 5-10 years. Do you have any sense that, as far as the actual hiring and doing the day-to-day work as an employee, that AI is going to always be a benefit, or in some ways it could replace or supplant some of the need for team members to be a part of a big project?
I'm pretty sure it's already happening to some extent. I know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the full extent of its 3D modeling capabilities. Cody's probably more knowledgeable, but I know that they're making leaps and bounds. So a lot of the really grunt work, 3D modeling, whatever needs to get done, I think it has started to go to AI. And some studios, depending on whether they want to use AI or not, I think that's really what depends on whether they're giving that work that it can do, like concept work or 3D modeling, or if it could do UVs, that would be awesome. But most studios, I think it just depends on whether or not they're willing to take that into their workflow.
I think you could tie that into animation. Sorry. You know how back in the early 90s, they would have people, interns or whatever, drawing in-betweens from the main poses. Now that's completely replaced with digital animation. So I think some of the grunt work would get replaced, and someone with more knowledge of how things work would be sought after, like a generalist, knowing a little bit of everything so they can piece everything together with AI.
Traditionally, the entry level people in a lot of different fields were those that did the grunt work. So my question comes back. If
Yeah.
companies don't need people to do the grunt work anymore, and they're saying that they want 2 to 3 years or more of experience, even to get hired at an entry level, hasn't that or won't that impact you and your careers and your fellow college graduates? Or do you think something else is going to evolve in the near term that will be more beneficial to you guys?
With my experience on social media, I follow a few art accounts, like 3D modeling and CG accounts, and it's coming to the point where you have to market yourself independently, and there's no entry-level jobs anymore. It's now you gotta do the grunt work yourself and get into the level of a studio quality artist while having a side job and proving yourself on social media, marketing yourself that you can do the job. There's been multiple instances of like YouTubers, like for instance, a YouTuber called Kane Pixels. He's learned Blender, which is a 3D program, and created stories on YouTube, and eventually he got picked up by the Studio A24 to create his own film. So it's just marketing yourself on the internet at that point.
It's so interesting. I want to double click on what you said. There's no entry level jobs anymore because I mean it sounds scary, but it's the fact, right? Because we're seeing a lot of that. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Cody and Kelly. Both of you guys have recently graduated, right? And
Yes.
so
Yes.
you guys are in sort of that seeking for the next chapter in your adulthood, if you will.
Right.
Talk us through a little bit in terms of how are you, I mean, what's the experience has been like for you as a recent grad seeking employment, and then just describe it. I mean, what do you do to stand out? What do you do to overcome what is now well-documented barriers, which is we expect you to have years of experience. We expect you to be job ready. We expect you to do a lot more high value work as opposed to grunt.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of self-production now that we've graduated. Yeah, you can apply to jobs. I feel like I apply to so many positions just knowing that I'm not going to hear back. Or when I do hear back, it won't be in the way that I want to hear back. But what you really have to do is either balance that or completely pour yourself into your work because, like Cody was saying, marketing yourself is honestly the best way to get yourself out there at this point. It's hard to create new techniques sometimes, but that's probably the best way, honestly, to make something completely and utterly just like new and exciting that will create what's the word? Opportunities for you because when companies see it, then they say, whoa, that's new, that's different, maybe we need that. Like the A24 film, I think I know what you're talking about. It was very like 3D within the real world, but also stylized and realistic at the same time. And it was just very different and new and it fit the company's vision. So also targeting yourself to maybe fit into a certain mold can also help. But marketing yourself is definitely using your work is probably the best way right now.
Can you talk a little bit more, Kelly? Can you help us understand? I mean, you say you apply for so many jobs. I mean, through which portal? What's the process? And I'd love to understand that a little bit more because I think a lot of you. By the way, I really appreciate your sharing this. A lot of grads are expressing very similar sentiment as well. So perhaps your experience and your sort of assessment can be helpful. And part of this purpose and why we're having this conversation too is we want to be able to advocate on your behalf to higher ed, to employers, because this is a societal opportunity, if you will.
I'm usually on LinkedIn these days. I did try Indeed for a little bit, but it feels like the Wild West out there a little bit. It's hard to navigate. I want to be able to have all of these options, but it tries to hone you in on a specific location or a specific job position. And that's really constraining, especially with our background coming from an interdisciplinary degree where I have a lot of skills and I can fit into a lot of jobs and I can prove that through my portfolio. But if I only apply for one job type, I'm really cutting myself off. So I tend to stick to LinkedIn or even just cold emailing companies, which I don't like to do, but I will do it. Just reaching out and saying, hey, I have this experience as an animator. Here's my portfolio. If you have any job opportunities, let me know. I haven't had a lot of responses from that, but at least with LinkedIn, it's really easy. There's even that easy apply feature that you can just get your name out there. It shares your profile with the recruiters, which does something, at least it gets your name out there. But that's kind of been the base level of my experience for now.
What about you, Cody?
I've had a little bit of a different experience. I was able to get a job with UF doing exactly what I wanted to do, and it's a environment art position. A little bit what I do is I'm working on 2 projects currently, and it's creating a Italian villa that is historically like accurate and just restoring it to how it might look like back then, like in the early 1600s or so. And the other one is a spring restoration program where we're going to show in a time lapse using Unreal Engine. Both of these projects are of how Florida Springs would be back then without human interaction, all the way up to like pollution and how things might have been after human interaction. So I didn't really have that job search. I was referred to the position, and then obviously my portfolio spoke, and then they hired me based off that and my work.
Well, Cody, some of what you just said seems to reinforce that old adage about it's not necessarily what you know,
Yeah.
it's who you know. But at the same time, are any of your classmates, the people that you hung out with, or you still stay in touch, are they all having that same experience, or what do you see in some of your friends' experience right now at this point in their careers?
I have a video editor friend. He found a job right out of college, so he was able to transfer all his motion graphics and editing skills to where his family is. So some people get lucky like that, or like they have the work to show off and then people can notice it. But I also have another friend. She works on the same projects as me, but she's looking for, something more tuned to games. And she's had trouble applying to a lot of jobs. I think she said over a couple hundred, and they all either send back, "Oh, we're looking for another candidate. We'll contact you if there's another position open that you fit for," which they never do contact you back. They never personalize the email enough to be like it feels automated. It doesn't feel human at that point.
It's not surprising to hear because we're hearing that across from multiple sources. The impact of AI on recent grads, right? But on the flip side of it, University of Florida is world renowned. It's one of the top school brands in the world. And if that's what's happening, I can't even imagine what it would be like for others, right? Without that same prestige. Has this experience changed your expectation at all in terms of career? And then if you have to go back in the last couple of years, what would you have done differently?
I definitely would have leaned more into the it's who you know, the connections sort of thing. I do have a lot of good connections, but just the market itself is not in a good place right now, the job market, especially when we're talking about animation and games and this industry. More opportunities to connect, even with our peers in other schools. I think having more contact with artists who are just like us could be even more beneficial because it's hard to demystify that sort of thing where they are our competition, but they're also our peers and the people that we'll be working with, not just trying to get a job instead of. And so I think that would be important to build more community in that respect, and that way you have even more connections for the future. And then it's always just better to talk to people who are in the industry and can get you that job. But I feel like you could say that no matter how many people you met.
If you were able to find and select the perfect company that you'd like to work with or start your own, those are two different things. What would the qualities of the company that you want to work for, what would they be? A multinational organization, a nonprofit, one that, gave to charity. Are there any categories of that? I'll start with Cody and then come to Kelly. Ideally, what kind of firm or entity would you want to be working for in terms of a career, a longer term affiliation, maybe than just a gig here and there?
I would say a company that truly cares about their employees. You hear about the crunch time and all that. Sure, they have deadlines, but their deadlines aren't to, make sure their employees' health is intact. It's more like to satisfy the investors, which kind of dehumanizes the artist. There's a lot of criticism over video games and movies and how this looks rushed. It's not the artist's fault. It's what they're being told to do. So I think we're kind of villainized at that point. So a company that has strong values in like keeping their employees' health intact is very important.
Kelly?
Go ahead, Kelly.
I agree. I think it's also while there are lots of big companies that do provide that sort of stability in terms of money and benefits, I do think a lot of smaller studios these days are actually providing that safer environment in terms of your well-being while you are doing the work and how much work you're doing at a time. Especially with a lot of people calling for like the rise of the indies, where we see these big studios making all of this content that is kind of iterative on itself, and indie studios are making things that are new but also treating their employees well. So that kind of is where I would love to lead. But in terms of stability of life outside of my job, a bigger company is usually where you want to end up for that. So it's hard to know.
I feel compelled to share with you guys this quick story because I think it could be a way to help, you guys, your generations in future as well. I find myself that I'm able to get a lot more work done using AI. Grunt work, low value tasks, if you will. Again, that used to be assigned to first year associate. I was able to leverage the AI tool to get a lot of things done. But this past week, there was a highly personalized email that was sent to me. And it was super interesting. It references a number of things that most people don't know about me. And the individual close to the email is like, what if I tell you this email was written by AI? Would you be interested in talking to me? Which is really a very interesting approach. Long story short, that email was written by a sophomore college student attending Pennsylvania State University at the moment. And he reached out to me to offer free service to build up his portfolio, his test case, and then ultimately he would monetize to help get more meetings set up for me. And by demonstrating that he has set up trained AI to write such a highly personalized and targeted email. And then when I met with him, he showed me how he was able to set that up in this whole automated workflow, stitching together a number of AI tools, everything from contact finder to email verification to warming up the email to doing research, all of that set up in an automated format. And it blew my mind because typically for me, that would take a lot of time and effort, endless hours, right? And here's this individual sophomore in college. He showed me that it can be done and scale. So I feel like I want to share that story because I think when he walked through all of these things, it's not native to me. I didn't grow up with technology like you guys do, right? And the way he went through it, it was amazing. So I guess the question to you guys is, how do you leverage the fact that you grow up with technology? This is second nature to you in a lot of way, right? How do you do that? How do you stand out? How do you leverage it to then add value to people like us who are very much in the workforce, very much worry about the top and the bottom line, very much worry about how do I outrun the competition?
I think each generation is learning and having digital literacy quicker. Like Generation Alpha, the one next to us, they're going to have way, way more digital literacy than us. And since we're growing up with it, sure, we learn while we're growing up, but we're still figuring it out. Like 3D software back then in like the 90s when it started first becoming like a VFX like powerhouse. Obviously, like 18-year-olds weren't learning that type of software because it wasn't publicly available. Now it is. So now you have teenagers learning the software. And I think, honestly, the age is going to get even lower and lower, and they're going to become even more of a professional quicker and having a longer career. And just people are just going to keep getting better. And I'll tie that into myself with 3D software. I came in before UF kind of knowing this 3D software, and I chose this program because it would further my connections and give me some idea of what exactly I wanted to do with my career. But resources like YouTube and such are now like can help anybody learn anything.
I think also while we are growing up with it, it does still tend to outrank us, outclass us to some degree, because there are times that you see what AI is capable of, and it is mind blowing and also frightening at times. So even though we are sort of the generation that everyone pegs to be like the one that is growing up with this technology, is pushing it forward and all these things, it is still, sometimes it is beyond even us as being one of the younger generations and entering the workforce.
Each generation, of course, in the zeitgeist that they come to college and then out into the workforce has specific challenges and characteristics, broadly stated. I'm pretty sure it's a lot of misconception, but many employers in this country have gotten the impression that Gen Z folks have a considerably different work ethic than the generations that came before them. Is that unfair? Is that a stereotype that somehow got out of control? You guys, I know both of you from being in the program. You are both top level students. Yet, as Charlie said earlier, not everyone has the advantage of going to a top 5 university and being, a certain level. So what do you think of that concept that employers do sometimes think that the work ethic is not what they were looking for?
I could chime in on I think they're thinking about it wrong. I think Gen Z is more consciously aware of what they're worth, and sometimes companies might ask too much, and Gen Z aren't afraid of saying, you know what, I don't want this job. I will look for something else. Instead of, I think the millennial culture and maybe Gen X is like, just stick it out and everything will be fine. But then they end up being miserable at the end of the day.
Also, I think Gen Z works differently maybe than other generations do, especially as we were just talking about with growing up with technology. We all tend to have this need for lots of influx of information all at once. So I know working with music or even just watching something while we work, that's a normal, even if you're just doing homework at home. That's just something that I feel like a lot of us do because it helps us stay focused on the task at hand. And maybe that might be more of a foreign concept to someone who's older and hiring, and they see that more as, oh, they're distracted because they're having all these different things at the same time. But it's really more of just we work differently, but it's not less productive in a way.
I love to kind of dive into that a little bit. So here's the reality, right? The workforce today, I don't even know all the generations in the workforce, Professor James, so maybe you can check me on this, but Gen X, which I'm a member of, is still very much dominant. There's slightly on the back end, the baby boomer, and there's millennial is the next one after Gen X. So more or less, the current workforce today is set with certain cultures, certain expectations, and so on and so forth. Now, you guys are going in some way you have to, when in Rome, do what the Romans do, right? I mean, so you have to kind of assimilate. Is that going to be, just obviously, I don't want you to speak for the entire Gen Z, but I'm going to ask you to speak for the entire Gen Z. Is that a unrealistic expectations that we have of the incoming workforce? Or in your opinion, we need to modify our expectation in order to accommodate and better onboard Gen Zs?
It's hard to say. There definitely are outdated practices in companies. I know that I have family who's had like a shift in their company being bought, and then the practices were changed from a small company to a big company, and how they're treated is differently. And you do kind of see that the older the company, the more traditional the practices. Like you're working that 9 to 5. It's not hybrid. It's not remote. You're expected to sit at your desk fully like locked in for however long, which is fair. But there's also something to be said for a welcoming work environment and how that will help with productivity. I feel like there's so much research on that already. Like that's not a new concept. But when you're talking about Gen Z specifically, you can take that even further. And do we need now to incorporate more time where we're working with other people? Like is collaboration something bigger that works with Gen Z? Because I know sometimes I work better when I'm with other people as opposed to simply just at my desk by myself, even if we're working on different things. And then that can also translate to whatever else might be benefiting a Gen Z workflow. I don't know if Cody has more thoughts on it.
I had some experience. My sister used to work in a marketing firm, and that marketing firm is based in Miami, and it's kind of old. It's quite old, and the CEO is fairly old. I think closer to baby boomer. And whenever she would do her work, she's millennial, but she would do her work and essentially finish a couple hours before, but she was told to always stay at her desk until it hits 9 to 5. Gen Z is more so focused on getting the job done as quick as possible rather than stretching it out to a point where it's like, oh, that's productivity. You're doing it over this period of time.
Cody, if I'm hearing you guys correctly here, it's not about that we need to adjust our expectation, but we need to adjust how we see work is being done.
Yeah.
And adjust how we
don't measure
connect the
how
dot.
long you do it and how like the quality, and because not everything takes forever, but with the company my sister used to work for, they would force her to stay even though her work is done, instead of reward her with like, oh yeah, you can leave early, oh you can do this, you can do that. So it's just I guess traditionally it's like you always got to stay in office until it's your time to leave.
Yeah, well, let's juxtapose that with what we talked about earlier. AI speeding up things, the grunt work, and put this in the context. If you, each of you, Cody and Kelly, were able to speak to a CEO or a hiring manager for a company that you really wanted to work with, but you were unsure if they had some of this, you got to be at your desk, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say to them to encourage them to change, to take advantage of the strengths of your generation, and then at the same time be compatible with the culture that's been established at that corporation? Because that's the crux of some of what we're talking about. If the culture is on site, 9 to 5, if you get done early, we still want you here in case whatever. What would you say to that CEO or hiring manager to try to let them see your perspective?
It does sound like something where I would say I'm more productive in these kinds of settings, and I have proof of this because I work at my desk every day, and these are the different things that I interact with. Showing that kind of factual sort of backing to what you're saying maybe could help. I don't know that speaking to a CEO or someone who has control over a work environment or how often you're working, if there's much to change beyond saying, hey, maybe we entertain the remote or the hybrid approach better because there's studies on how productivity and how much this actually works.
This is very recent for you guys. You graduated in April, May-ish, right?
Yeah.
Looking back, how would you make that whole transition from education to career if you have the ability to change that? How you would do it differently so that you will be sitting here today feeling like you're much more ready for the workforce, you're much more ready to capture the next career opportunity?
Utilizing social media, even though it's considered amateur, that whole thing of marketing yourself is becoming increasingly important. Whether you're a music producer, a singer, a 3D artist, an artist, if what you do is a type of media, audio or visual, proving yourself out there before looking for something is very important. Since we're graduating, technically still in the transitional period with remote jobs and such, it's still fairly new, and some companies didn't trust it in COVID, and some people are coming back to traditional. But with our Gen Z now going into the workforce now, our digital literacy is higher, and I think during COVID, it was mainly the millennials going into remote jobs. Gen X is going into remote jobs where they didn't have that type of literacy where it's like manage your own time, or maybe they're so used to being around other people that being by themselves, their productivity goes lower. There's no study on how Gen Z and productivity is for online work and remote work. So it's very difficult to.
I love the point you just brought up, Cody. That's awesome, and here's why, right? Because you're hearing after COVID, companies now are mandating back in the office, they're mandating return to work, and they place great emphasis on hiring locally because they want whoever it is they hire to be in the office. And the point that you just made is I think it's amazing. God, definitely one of the key insights that I take away from this, but. Let's come back to the kind of career preparation, if you will, because as part of your college experience, you have resources at school, such as career service, career center, whatever it is. Do you feel like that the work that they've done there, what could they have done differently or more of to help you more ready? You talk about the self-marketing, social media, but so that's self-marketing. What else could they have done differently?
There's definitely, I don't want to say it's more difficult for artists because everyone has challenges when it comes to connecting with professionals, but it does feel as though it's harder to meet professionals that the university can like actually connect you with. That's difficult, and I feel like there could always be more opportunities for that, especially at UF.
It brings up a very good point. Where UF is a STEM school, not an art school. So all these career fairs, you go, and they're all looking for engineers, aerospace, scientists, whatever, chemists. So it's usually up to the program, like Digital Worlds Institute, where they make their own connections in-house rather than being a whole holistic UF thing.
Well, guys, it's been incredible discussions, and I would love to talk for the next few hours if time permits. But obviously, I know that you got to get shit done, and there's just a lot of things that you want to do. So I really want to extend our sincere appreciation for you to come on to the Job Ready podcast and sharing with us your experience. And we're going to share the insights from this with employers and the people that we work with, listen to the podcast about your experience, because I think you guys are the future of the U.S. workforce, and we've got to step up effort to help you leverage AI, use AI as a tool rather than seeing AI as a potential competition. And they can be incredibly tough to compete with, right? So really appreciate you coming on. Kelly, Cody, great to have you. With that, I'm signing out. Charlie, the entrepreneur.
I remain Professor James, and we're glad that you joined us today. Again, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Cody, for being with us from the University of Florida. Digital Worlds Institute graduates, go get them.
Badass.